Hello, Alabama fans. Oh, wait, I've been instructed to say Roll Tide, Alabama fans. I'm Tim Watts, BOL site publisher. Hey, we had criticism on the site last week. They wanted a Roll Tide. With me is Andrew Bone, the recruiting editor for BamaOnLine.com. Andrew, join us with the Roll Tide. Welcome.
Roll Tide. Thank you guys for watching today. Got plenty to jump into, don't we, Tim?
Yeah, it's been a busy weekend, and we're going to do a brief intro, talk a little bit. We're going to bring on Joseph Hastings, our recruiting analyst, in a little bit. Been a lot of news this weekend. I mean, kind of closed it out with started fast. And this is a little different for us. We've been in this game a long time, but we've never really had to deal with the next class in January. I mean, we had the visitor days have always kind of been there. You know, that last weekend, Nick Saban liked to have his past class, the last class done, and then get a head start with a small group, but never 25 plus pretty elite athletes to be on campus, Andrew.
Yeah, it's a great group. I mean, you look at the roster of guys that were in Tuscaloosa for Junior Day, and every single one of those guys prior to the weekend had an offer from Alabama, except for one, and we'll get into him a little bit later. But overall, great collection of talent that was in town. A lot of in-state guys, but also some key out-of-state players.
Yeah, and I think the big news last night, and I think we kind of brought it on ourselves. Um, Kind of waited for that dead period to hit at midnight to get a break because it's been recruiting every day again in January, which is always pretty quiet. And here we are having Ryan Grubb announced as the offensive coordinator. Nick Sheridan is staying. Been talking about Grubb since the minute he was let go from the Seattle Seahawks. And I mean, you remember last year, hello, I'm your Alabama offensive coordinator on Wednesday. We're like, "Ooh, the week's over." And then Friday night, minding our business, he's eating jalapeno poppers and drinking beers with the Seahawks, the Seahawks head coach and owner.
Yeah, obviously that was the big news last night, and a rumor that had been floated for the last few weeks. I think
Long time.
it was almost like the Nick Saban rumor. Everybody, okay, he's going to retire. He's going to retire, and then as soon as Grubb was let go in for the Seahawks, everybody, oh, he's coming back to Alabama. He's coming back to Alabama. But I think you had a pretty good feeling of what was going to happen there with Grubb, but you never really know until it officially happens, which was obviously last night.
You know, the thing about Grubb, I mean, he was here for a couple of weeks. It was very quiet. We saw him one time last year. And then it just took over that everybody knew him and his wife so well that they could say she hated Tuscaloosa. I mean, she's been on social media. I felt bad. She's on social media saying that wasn't true. Tweeted out Roll Tide last night. I don't think they got a fair shake. I mean, when you look at it as an adult, you live in Seattle, you have a young daughter, probably in elementary school, somewhere around that age. You have a wife, and if you could keep that same house, he didn't even have to change his socks when he changed jobs. He didn't have to buy a new lawnmower or anything. I just felt like that they didn't like Tuscaloosa was kind of harsh. And also, just because you prefer Seattle or prefer any city over another city, don't mean you don't like the other city. Everybody has their favorite cities, but your thoughts on that leading up to him coming back and all the rumors, like you said.
And obviously having a shot to coach in the NFL for a year in a place where you've been involved in the community for the last couple of years, and you want to take that opportunity. So he's back in Tuscaloosa now, and he's got a roster with some good quarterbacks on it, but he's also going to start recruiting his own targets in this 26 class. So looking forward to
Let's
that.
take a minute
We got
to
a
what
we got a story on BOL this morning on some of the early quarterback targets and guys that he even recruited when he was in Tuscaloosa last January. So be interested to see how hard he starts to go after those guys.
we'll continue on that. Let's welcome a few of the people that were waiting on us. Five Adam was in here. Looks like he was first in line in the kiosk. Roll Tide Marcus Smith, Tex Tider, one of our favorite BOLers, and also on the YouTube. C. Skelt. Appreciate you looking out, joining in. Do us a little donation. He said Andrew's hat's not well enough, so we're saving up to get Andrew a new hat. Probably me a new hoodie, one or the other. Thank you for that. Bama Metcalf, welcome in. Mikey M, Roll Tide. Appreciate all of you. If you missed anybody, I apologize. But yes, thanks for joining the show. We're glad to have you here. But getting back to, like you said, with Grubb, they are already very particular about the quarterback position anyways, right? Last year, remember the blank check for Juju? Again, people love to throw your blank check somewhere, not their own blank check, but Juju blank check, Deuce Knight, all that stuff. But they were very methodical. Nick Sheridan went out on the road, saw a lot of people, narrowed it down. It wasn't like they rushed and offered Keelan. Now, when they had their quarterback, Andrew, 90 to 0 to 90.
Yeah, absolutely. And go back over this past month, there was close to 60 offers that were extended, and none were to 26 quarterbacks. So I think, not for sure knowing if it was going to be Grubb as the offense coordinator, that may have had a little bit of to do with it. But at the same time, they've got some of their early targets. A guy like Jared Curtis up in Nashville. They went and saw Dia Bell down in South Florida last week. So those are some guys that are high on the board, but we're now entering the dead period. We're in the dead period until March the 2nd. So over the course of this next month, Alabama's going to be able to evaluate, look through a lot of film. They're going to be able to talk to a lot of coaches, assistant coaches that were in different areas of the country recruiting in their area. They may have seen a quarterback that they like, and letting Grubb know about those guys. So there's going to be a lot of evaluations going on, leading up into the start of spring practice.
Yeah, and again, they'll be picking. Again, this year, they're recruiting against Keelan. It's a legitimate obstacle that you have to deal. So you're going to have to find that guy that's willing to go head to head with this guy. Number one, I think, I thought he was definitely in the mix for number one. A couple people had him number one. I think most had him number two overall player in the country and quarterback. But that's a factor. It's hard to stack those guys. But, you kind of want to have a quarterback follow Keelan that's a little bit nasty mentally, like Mac Jones was. You know what I mean? Mac Jones was a guy that called me out of the blue because somebody, and I'm sure he talked to you too, somebody at the grocery store asked him why he went to Alabama, and wasn't he scared of Jalen Hurts and Tua being there. He called me. I thought he was saying I said it. And I was like, no, I didn't say that. And he said, I'm not scared. They need to be scared. So, you need that mentality.
Mac was very confident.
He had that swagger. His walk out at that NFL draft was legendary. He's like John Travolta in a Saturday Night Fever movie. So, going from there. Yeah, I had a big list coming up this week. Junior Day. Let's talk in general. They started Zion Gibson, woke him up, crack of dawn, said, we're here. First day they went on the road. And from that moment, they went all the way to Kalen Morgan at Benjamin Russell. But, man, Andrew, they covered a lot of ground in between there.
Yeah, you go out, you see Zion, the very first guy during the contact period, and the last guy, Kalen Morgan. It kind of makes you, look at it as, in-state's going to be a pretty big priority for Alabama. And there's a lot of in-state guys, but, man, they hit so many different regions of the country. They hit a lot of states kind of over and over. So it kind of, pointed out that these are going to be some of the areas that they're going to heavily recruit in this cycle, whether it was Florida, Texas, Ohio, Georgia, and even California. So there's a lot of areas that they're going to blanket this cycle. And, we saw a lot of those guys in Tuscaloosa this past weekend.
Their last week, so they woke up Sunday in Alabama, flew to California, flew back to California, flew back to Florida. Senior Bowl activities, too, were participating in there. Flew to the DMV, flew back to Florida the next night. That was their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Woke up Friday morning in South Florida, hit all the schools in South Florida. You never know what's at South Florida. We obviously won't have – those guys will be turning up left and right as guys that – juniors who've never played because of talent ahead of them, and then closing out with Kalen Morgan. So, the thing I kind of felt funny, there was at one point going into last week, they're like, we had the thread, obviously, Florida. First, Atlanta wasn't a priority. That was a big discussion. That was not true. They definitely were heavy there. It was just a cycle of coming. And then it was like, I guess Florida's not a priority, but they spent a lot of time in the Sunshine State last week.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people looked at it as, well, DeBoer's not here, but a lot of it is assistant coaches are there. They're going out. They're seeing a lot of different kids, right out the gate. And DeBoer's hitting as many schools as he possibly can. So, he had 3 weeks there where he was hitting schools, almost every single day over the course of the last 3 weeks. And they got a lot of travel miles in. And I think it certainly sets them up in a very positive way. Even though Alabama only has one commitment right now, they're in a lot better position right now than they were a year ago when nobody knew what the hell was going to happen. Everybody was just trying to get kids in for junior days, whoever they could, and then try to figure it out during the dead period. Now they know who most of their targets are in this 26 class. There's going to be some more that are going to emerge, but a lot of the guys they already know about, already have a relationship with, have already been to campus, and that's going to set them up heading into the spring and summer official visits.
Yeah, and you remember last year, spring was insane. We've never seen, I mean, it was always a big deal. Kids came through in the spring, but Nick Saban and his staff were so focused on the football season. We bragged on them last year for setting that groundwork for the recruiting class. They ended up happening, which was number 3 in the country, number 2 by some people. They got caught at the end with a bunch of, some guys that moved up for Georgia, but a very elite class. I'm not sure there's not many schools that wouldn't swap for Alabama's class, but they did a lot of that in the spring. But now, like you said, they've got this whole visitor day, big deal, plus that whole January window of high five and shaking hands and all that. So when they now come in the spring, it's not going to be so much an introduction. It's going to be a welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Alabama's recruiting class, I don't think anybody would have expected this time last year that Alabama was going to sign a top 3 class in Coach DeBoer's first year. They were so far behind last year. It's not even funny. But now they're so far. Not necessarily so far ahead, but they're so much further ahead than they were a year ago. That it's certainly going to help them as far as recruiting guys, having those relationships. But they had a lot of those top end guys in Tuscaloosa for the weekend visits, and we'll see how spring goes. But we're already seeing official visits scheduled from a lot of different kids, which is kind of crazy to see because we're not used to seeing official visits getting scheduled this early. And these recruiting calendars just keep moving up higher and higher each and every year, or earlier and earlier each year.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Wiltfong from On3 had Trenton Henderson, a big-time prospect from the Panhandle, who was there at Junior Day setting up his this week. Several guys have announced they're setting it up. And the thing about it is, I realize when back people used to say he wants to go through the process and take his visits. Well, me and you're like, well, crap, we'll start covering them in January, right? Now that process is June. I mean, there was a lot of, and I know it felt like a long time, but Alabama did a lot of their work in June. I mean, I think it went all the way to the last commitment was either A.K. Deere or Ty Haywood. After that, it was very quiet because they put their class together, the guys they want. And I think that's what they're going to try to do this year. But you touched on it, no commitments. I think a lot of people forget last year when it comes to this year. I think they forget last year wasn't like Alabama got 10 commitments on Junior Day. Nick Saban never got a bunch of commitments on Junior Day. They did have more luck in the summer when they had guys in. They'd get 2 or 3, but that was 6 months into the process, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I think this past year what we saw is Alabama was trying to focus on their 25 class. They were trying to sign their first full recruiting class at Alabama. And obviously along the way, they were developing relationships. They were identifying, top juniors throughout the country. And we've seen them go out and see a lot of those guys. But now the full focus is on that junior class and on that 26 class. And, I think as we've kind of heard from various recruits, they're going to start making decisions in the spring. They're going to start taking official visits. But with the official visit calendar, when it started to move up and kids could start taking those officials during the summer, a lot of kids decided to wait until after those visits. So we start seeing more decisions in June, July, August than ever before. But I wouldn't worry too much about the early non-commitments because the guys that have 5, 6, 7, 10 commitments right now, they're going to have to hold on to those guys, and it's been pretty tough to do, with those early commitments. We saw a big target today, big kid today that committed to LSU, J. Raylan McCoy out of Mississippi, committed to LSU last month. Reopened his recruitment today and has already been predicted to Ole Miss. So, do you want to be in that situation, or do you want to be patient and let this process play out a little bit further?
I agree. There's kids that commit and it's over. Alabama saw those guys. I mean, if you appreciate anything about Keelan Russell, appreciate the fact he never flirted with everybody flirting with him. And it was more than that. Like, there wasn't a lot of drama with Bama guys. If you look at the commitments, you look, Caleb Cunningham obviously was a red flag, but they circled back, prepared, and ended up with Derek Meadows, tremendous upside wide receiver from Bishop Gorman. Um, you did, Mike. Michael Carroll was the biggest stir. He went to Colorado and locked it down the next Tuesday. That was the biggest stir that he visited Colorado. Now imagine he visited Georgia. You know what I mean? So I mean, if you look on the grand scale of how much drama there was in their class, there wasn't. I mean, I'm not sure Lotzir Brooks left the house. I think he committed. And his stock was up, and schools were calling him. So we want to say roll tide to everybody that's jumped in here late. AK roll tide. Bob Rutherford, a stalemate. Tia Carter showing up. Oh, Tia's coming in hot. Welcome and appreciate all of y'all joining us live. And do us a favor, we're about to add Joseph Hastings and get into these Junior Day updates. But do us a favor if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. You'll get the notifications. It costs you nothing. You get the notifications when we're doing another show. We pick these up. I mean, it's going to be a little bit slower during the dead period, but spring's about to be here. There's going to be a lot of visitors, so you'll be getting updates. But we appreciate that like and subscribe. And with that in mind, let's bring in Joseph Hastings. Joseph Hastings, how are you doing?
Doing excellent, guys. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. And you've been watching backstage. It's just haven't really got into the junior list so far, the nuggets we've covered. We'll get into all of that. But tell us your thoughts on the January recruiting period. We've kind of went over everything they did, but give us some of your quick thoughts before we get into that junior day.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 7 years, been able to cover a few different staffs during this time. Obviously, it's different with the way the recruiting calendar is set up now, but just the work that Alabama's put in the month of January, it's kind of unlike anything that I've ever seen before. Just with how well executed it was, first 2 days spending it in the state of Alabama, making it known to Zion Gibson, who's already just committed a couple weeks before, that he is still a priority. You send 4 or 5 coaches to his school. Courtney Morgan and Maurice Linguist did an in-home visit with him later that day. He really felt the love from Alabama staff and continues to feel that way, going there on campus. And then, all the states they got to hit, from Florida to Georgia, all the way out to California, and everything in between. I just think they did an exceptional job of how they planned it out. And you got to remember, I think this was interesting. Like the week after they were first allowed to go on the road, there was a 3-day dead period. Because of a coaches convention. So they had to kind of fit everything into a shorter amount of time than you would normally like to have. But they did a great job of not only going there, meeting the kids, meeting their family members, but getting some visits set up, or at least, some plans to set up visits for the spring. So they did a really great job.
Another thing is they got caught up twice with snow. Snow kept them down. I know that Nick Sheridan was headed to the Houston, Louisiana area the day they got 10 inches of snow. So obviously had to cancel that in a few days. It wasn't optional. I mean, Houston was closing their airports. I mean, it was that. So they lost that Friday when they were supposed to go see Thompson High School, Hoover, some of those schools that are pretty much staples there. So I agree. Did a great job. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about a couple of the guys. I'm going to pick one. Everybody pick one that you want to talk about from this weekend visit, kind of like a little bit of inside stuff and kind of where we feel. I think the one I'm the most interested is the Ohio State, the Ohio linebacker, Sincere Johnson. I hate typing his name because my autocorrect on my texting to y'all it wants to fight me when I try to spell it. But I mean, this is a guy, it's a big time prospect. And I like the fact it starts out with no way, can't get him, won't get him, no way. We go through this every year, Ohio State. We went through it with Justin Hill. Now, it is a battle. Ohio State's a formidable talent. I mean, obviously won the national championship, know how to recruit and all that stuff. But he kind of sees himself a little bit in that, that Justin Hill role, that kind of want to break out from his mold, but obviously a tough pull. But I think Alabama did a great job of fighting there. Obviously, he's at Glenville. It's a huge Ohio State pipeline, but showed a little bit of heart coming down here, bringing his parents with him, showed that his his intentions. I think, and Alabama's going to get an official visit too. So that's going to be an interesting battle. Andrew, anyone that caught your mind?
Yeah, I think Tristan Keys from Mississippi, 5-star wide receiver from Hattiesburg. Alabama had a 5-star top 100 type wide receiver committed for a while last year from the great state of Mississippi, and Caleb Cunningham. This is a kid who currently looks like he wants to leave the state. He's got some early favorites like Alabama, Texas A&M, Tennessee. It's certainly looking like he's leaning towards leaving the state. And Alabama has done a really good job recruiting him thus far. He's got a great relationship with Coach Shep. I think this is going to be one of those cycles where we see 3 to 4 wide receivers in the class after Alabama only signed 2 wide receivers last year. Now, they didn't need a big receiver class last year, but this year, probably a couple more numbers. And I think Tristan Keys can certainly be one of those guys that's going to be on Alabama, that is going to have Alabama on his short list all the way until he makes that decision.
Joseph, give us one guy that stood out to you.
Anthony Tank Jones, in-state guy, 5-star prospect, number 1 edge in the country out of St. Paul's Episcopal in Mobile, Alabama, somebody that we've talked about ad nauseum. We've talked about him a lot. His recruitment's been going on for quite some time, but, I think it was interesting. I've spoken with him a handful of times. This time felt a little bit different just in terms of, his feelings toward Alabama, his comfortability on staff, how familiar he's getting with the coaching staff. It really feels like things are going beyond football. That relationship with Christian Robinson, being able to talk with Kalen DeBoer again. He mentioned to me in an interview that we posted on BamaOnLine that him and Coach DeBoer are kind of similar. They're laid back, and he can really relate to him. And obviously with Christian Robinson, he's mentioned before that that's the top relationship in his, in his recruitment. So I think Bama's continuing to make some pretty good progress there. And, now it will be the question about when he'll take his official visits, who he'll take his officials to. He's still got a long time to go in his recruiting process. He wants to take a bunch of visits in the spring, his summer official visits. I don't even know if after the officials it'll be done. It may go out into the season. He's not in any rush, but Bama's definitely doing what they need to do so far.
The one thing, 99 out of 100 kids end up getting sick of these visits. Now, there's always an exception. Caleb Cunningham took 100. Tony Mitchell set the record. I don't know what the record is, but Tony went on a trip. Every day he could go on a trip, and probably a couple times he wasn't supposed to be on trips. So Tony set that. But most of these guys get tired at some point. And Tank, he's playing basketball. He's hitting junior days. He's going to be out in the spring. He's going to have 4 or 5 official visits this summer. I'm curious to see if we don't get to that July, August, because often what do we hear? I'm ready to get it behind me before the season starts to focus. So we'll see how that plays out. Another guy I really like is Kamari Brooks. I think he's an interesting prospect. Came on campus. We just talked about Christian Robinson, unbelievable job that he does. And I found talking to a few people that him sitting down, he spent a lot of time with Justin Hill. And I think Christian Robinson was smart to get him in a room and say, this is how I see y'all complimenting each other. Now, last year they wanted one Wolf, and that Justin Hill was their main guy. They were willing to take a second like Dawson Merritt, but they were kind of crisscross on other sides of the field. I think that's where Brooks comes in. Now, if you watch this guy, he's a basketball. He's not a football player playing basketball. This guy's a basketball player. Reminds me a little bit of Terrion Arnold physically. He's got a good jumper and all that. But I think Christian did a good job. I'm looking to see how hard Georgia pushes here. They lost a kid last year from that same school, went to Clemson. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Y'all remember? North of Coney. Don't worry about it. I can't remember who it was, but he went to Clemson. I looked it up last night. Probably don't want to. Huh?
I said, you think we know?
Yeah, no, he went to Clemson. We kind of, when Peter Woods broke Clemson for us, right? He went there. We just, between Dabo and that, we're just like, no, thank you. So I'm curious to see what they do there, but really good trip for him. And one thing I wanted to add, you mentioned Zion Gibson earlier, Joseph. I feel like we were told he had close to double-digit family members who were probably more excited than he was, and he was pretty dang excited. Andrew, give us another guy and update us a little bit.
I think Bear McWhorter is an intriguing player. This is a kid out of Cass High School over in Georgia, a kid that a lot of people don't talk about, because he's not in that 5-star discussion yet. But this is a guy that has 30-plus schools heavily recruiting him. I think his stock's going to continue to climb. Alabama's been recruiting him since last year. They consider him one of their top offensive line targets on the recruiting board, and I think Alabama's done a really good job early on. I don't know when he's going to make a decision. I don't think it's going to be anytime right away, but that's a guy that we're going to be watching pretty closely this spring. I think he's going to come back for spring practice. We'll take an official visit, but that's a guy on the offensive line that probably doesn't get enough attention early on right now, but a guy that I think Alabama fans really need to know.
Yeah, and we'll have to remind everybody that follows recruiting, they're worried about 5 stars now means nothing. It means literally nothing. Because you go back, Jackson Lloyd, who ended up at a 5-star on 3. Yeah, he was a 3-star, literally a 3-star.
Michael Carroll was a 3-star at most sites this time last year.
Yep, Keelan Russell, he wasn't getting the respect he was. A lot of these guys at this time. Now you had guys that were 5-star. Alabama, a lot of fans were very upset. Bama lost, 5 stars, Caleb Cunningham and Ty Haywood. Well, they didn't even end up 5 stars. So that was a lot of worry for that. But there's a lot of guys that are going to go up. And the one thing about this recruiting staff, Joseph, is they go out and find guys unrelated. Andrew's going to talk about one I love in a little bit, an offensive lineman. But they do a good job of turning over the rocks, and their evaluations have been very strong.
Yeah, they've been exceptional with it. You mentioned about Nick Sheridan last year during the spring evaluation period, saw Keelan Russell throw at practice. And Keelan said this was pretty funny. He said that wasn't even his best day, practicing. But, Nick Sheridan saw something in him that, went beyond the football field, the intangibles that he has that we talked about a lot. And so the evaluation process isn't necessarily just what you see on the field or what you see on Huddle. They talk with family members, they talk with coaches, they do a really good job. And you saw that this past month of going to these schools, talking with everyone, associated with these kids and making sure that they are thorough with the evaluation process and the offer process. And not just throwing offers out there. And that's especially true when it comes to in-state, because, if you throw an in-state offer, that's one that you really want to do your due diligence with. So, I mean, once again, and it starts with Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, and goes all the way down. They've just done a really great job since arriving on campus. And I think last year was just an example with all the guys that you mentioned that you should have trust in the staff when it comes to evaluating recruits.
Yeah, I mean, we heard a lot of trash talk about guys like Lotzier Brooks. And even when it was plain as day how good Lotzier was, there was still people worried about who he was playing against. But, I mean, when you look at a guy at a small market like Lotzier was, you think you stick him at Thompson High School and he can't play? That's ridiculous. He's actually better. He's going to have a better people around him more than likely. And that's going to raise his game too. So the individual evaluations are really good.
We saw that with Michael Carroll this year, going from Pennsylvania to IMG. A lot of people were like, "Is he going to be as good at IMG as he was?" He was better. He kicked everybody's ass down there. So I definitely, I agree with what you said right there, Tim.
Tell us about Chris Booker, Andrew. I watched his film. Andrew had great scoop on this, brought him in, got him an offer this week. But you've been all over this man. And his film, when I went and watched his film last night, I was amazed. This is he almost looks like a little bit of a chunky tight end moving. He's moving around at 280, but that's how well he's moving.
Yeah, last year this kid that was 260 pounds, now he's 280, 6'4". More so an interior guy. Plays at Hateville Charter, outside of Atlanta, and this is a guy that received an offer at Junior Day. Who's the only player that arrived in Tuscaloosa without an offer, got the offer during the weekend visit, and this is a kid that is going to, in my opinion, now that Alabama's offered, we'll start seeing a lot more schools pay attention to them, extend offers over the course of the next few weeks, few months. But Mississippi State, Kentucky, some smaller schools have also offered them as well. But this is a big one for Chris Booker, and certainly a guy that we're going to be paying a lot closer attention to. Joseph had an interview with him on BOL after he announced the offer from Alabama, but definitely a new guy that is not related to Tyler Booker. A lot of people have already asked that, but he's not related to Tyler Booker. But certainly a guy that Alabama would love to see play as good as Tyler Booker potentially one day.
I mean, he was such an unknown. Andrew had to build his profile for our database, and we still don't have a picture with him yet. But
Oh,
they
yeah,
wanted
we
to
did.
see. They what? Do we have one?
I took care of it.
All right, look at you bragging.
Oh,
I
yeah.
will say this has been a subject. I'm going to fix this. These guys are worried. I mean, I've been like this for months, and they now see Mickey Mouse ears. But once it's the second or third person.
Now
Once
I
they
see it.
mention it, now
Yeah.
I can't unsee it. I can't unsee it. So J Man and whoever mentioned that earlier, not a bad call. I will rearrange that. So
That's pretty
I was like, first time I'm like, no, it's fine. Then I'm like, holy crap, other people are noticing. But yeah, anyways, Andrew got him a profile picture. Guy came in. I think with that no offer, it was huge. They anticipated offering him, but when they saw him in person, and the one thing, and we didn't know this, I don't know if y'all knew this, he came to Alabama for a game last year. I don't even know if we ever, I
Two
probably
games.
did.
Yeah.
We probably, what'd you say?
Yeah, he went for 2 games, Mercer and Auburn.
Well, why didn't you build his profile? I don't
I thought-
understand. I don't understand what you just told on yourself, Joe. You never told yourself. Hey, we're gonna let you stop. We're gonna get you.
Picture on there, and he built the whole profile.
Would you like to talk to an attorney? I think that's where we're at in this. I've never seen Joseph blush, so that's a good one. Joseph, give us a guy from this weekend. I mean, I know there's a California guy you're dying to talk about. We all love. I saw a picture. I was shocked standing next to Dijon that this guy's almost the same exact height as Dijon Lee.
Yeah, so Brandon Arrington is one that we've, known about for a little bit. He got offered by Alabama last spring. He had gotten offered by the Washington staff, Jamarcus Shepard, back when he was a freshman. That was his 5th offer at the time. So once again, this Alabama staff knows how to evaluate. He's a top-ranked athlete in the country, wants to play cornerback. And, throughout the process, we saw him go from 6 foot, which was his height on his on-3 profile, to him listing himself at 6'3". So how you all have been doing this for a while now, a long time. Kids will tell you, yeah, I've gone up from 5'11", now I'm 6'4", and you have to kind of be careful with those measurements. We saw him at junior day on the field, Nick Saban Field, at Bryant-Denny Stadium, standing next to Dijon Lee, who's 6'4". I saw Dijon in person. And he was right there next to him. So that's 6'3", long wingspan, the 10-2 speed that he brings to the table. That's a very exciting combination when you talk about the cornerback position. He got to spend a lot of time with Maurice Linguist, has really built a great relationship there. Already had, that established relationship with Jamarcus Shepard going back to Washington, Courtney Morgan, Kalen DeBoer. But Coach Linguist has been the one that, he's really trying to prioritize building that relationship with, and has done a good job with that. Went with some family members, enjoyed his time there, said that Alabama's going to get an official visit from him. So, I spoke with him a couple weeks ago, and I think I said on the live show, it felt a little bit different talking with him this time around compared to when I spoke with him back in October. Bama's definitely made up some ground compared to where they were before. I know we heard a lot about Texas A&M. There were predictions put in. He said recently that he doesn't have a number 1 school in his recruitment. So I think things have been kind of going in the positive direction there for Bama in recent weeks.
Yeah, and you look at him, I mean, of course, it's a long ways away and a lot to happen between them. But you look at Bama's recruiting Kobe Bryant's nephew, Jet Washington, at safety, who's a good 6'4". You put, you look at a secondary with a bunch of guys in that 6'3" plus range. I'm not sure I've really seen that. I know Seattle Seahawks at one point had a pretty big secondary at one time, but that would be interesting in itself. I think the guy for me, E.J. Kroll, is the one I'm watching just because – there's a lot, because he was kind of we knew he was elite. We knew he was great. We knew he'd have all those offers, but he was kind of on the back of our mind because he's 2027. It wasn't a big deal. It's not a rush. Even if he commits to Bama or somewhere else, it's not a big deal. But the minute he reclassified, that upped the ante for everything. That moved his process forward. So getting him back on campus, again, and he's comfortable. I mean, he's been there a handful of times. It's not like he's a stranger. But getting him back, again, coming off of 1 running back class, and I know sometimes people think in bulk you need 2 running back. You don't really. You need the guys that can impact. And the one thing I think the staff has did a good job of is trying to sign players that they think can play right away. And there's still some guys that can play in the future. But you got to remember, every single prospect you sign, you can't just take 26 to take 26, because those 4 extra probably cost you, $400,000 a minimum dollars of the NIL. They're no longer coming just to come. And if they're coming just to come, probably, that's a developmental guy that could grow down the road. Andrew, here's where we're at. We went through a lot in January. We thought it was over. Ryan Grubb shocked us last night, hoping there's no more shocks. The coaches have a week off. I think it's a week. This is kind of a dead period and all that stuff. We got to get ready for the spring, right? What are you anticipating going forward? Coaches get this break, then they'll be back to business as usual.
I think we'll see a lot of new offers. We saw a lot of offers over the course of the last month with coaches going out, extending offers to 26, 27, 28 recruiting classes. But those aren't all the offers that are getting extended. They went out, they saw a lot of kids, they got a lot of film. They're going to have sit downs, discussions, meetings with the whole staff, trying to figure out, is this a guy that we really want to, pursue, extend an offer to? Is this a guy that we don't want to continue to pursue? Maybe they got an offer last year and they're not going to have that offer anymore. So there's going to be a lot of evaluations going on with the coaching staff. They're going to try to figure out who they want to get in for spring practices. But as we've seen, there's a lot of official visits that are also starting to get scheduled. So we're going to see a lot of, I think we're going to see a lot more official visit dates get scheduled over the course of the next month for the spring and summer.
Joseph, what are you anticipating going forward? I mean, Andrew's got a good point. I mean, last year we saw triple digits. I don't even know how many it was. I just said triple digits. I think it was well in the triple digits with guys coming through. But I think the spring, I think the smart move is, because this junior day was focused on 2026. Chicken was going to try to make it. The Wolf commitment from Viger had another event come up, but it was focused on 2026. But I think that spring you're going to get a heavy dose of 2027s coming through.
Yeah. So the point I was going to bring up was the official visits. Bone added that at the end. So I think that is something we're going to start to see. In the coming weeks. We've already talked about. Some of the guys who've already scheduled it: EJ Kroll, Lamar Brown, Kamarian Johnson, Trent Henderson, as you mentioned before, Tim. You're going to start to see those official visits, and Anthony Tank Jones and some others. Brandon Arrington said that Alabama's going to get an official visit. So that's one thing we're going to be watching for. In the spring, like you said, too, seeing some of those underclassmen come in, who start to show some early interest in the Crimson Tide. We've already seen that the staff isn't opposed to taking early commitments, like Chicken and like Alex Ward, Barack Willis, who already decommitted, but said that he's going to still consider the Crimson Tide. So, interested to see how things play out with that 2027 class, and how many offers are extended, how things build from there. But, I expect it to be, if what we saw from last year is any indication, they should have a good amount of 2026 prospects on campus in the spring. And I think those visits will be spread out pretty well, like we saw last year, in terms of big name prospects getting on early March, for start of spring practice, then, throughout the month, and then A-Day game, it all builds up there. So, I think the staff will handle things well when it comes to a scheduling visit standpoint.
Let's play a game. Let's make y'all uncomfortable. No photos involved. But, Andrew, I want you to pick a surprise commitment that's going to come from this. And we're not going to hold them accountable. I mean, obviously, there's a million things in this day and age. We're all going to do it. Pick a surprise commitment from this weekend, or even somebody they saw on the road. It didn't necessarily have to come from junior day, but, a little bit of a hot take, put some risk in it.
Is it a surprise?
I think it's not a surprise Bama's recruiting, but I think it's maybe somebody doesn't expect, that they could get. I mean, even Brandon Arrington, I don't think Brandon Arrington's a lock, but to me, he's a top 10 national prospect from California with offers from across the world. So if you choose a guy like that, I think there's some risk involved, because I don't know of anybody that would call him a lock, except for 3 guys on our board who call everybody a lock. But
Brandon Arrington.
Who?
Yeah, I'll take the low-hanging fruit. Brandon Arrington. That's my.
Bobby, you literally. That's a good one.
And I'll tell you the reason behind it. I think the sure. California connection in Tuscaloosa, the guys that the defensive back group that's there right now, Damani Jackson, Xavier Brown, the guys that they just signed, Dejon Lee, Chuck McDonald. Those are 4 California defensive backs that are on Alabama's roster. Or Chuck McDonald's not there yet, but he'll be there in the summer. Those are guys that are going to be recruiting him. And Xavier and Damani played a big role in recruiting Dejon Lee and Chuck McDonald last year because of that California connection. They were able to sell Alabama's program. Those are guys that could have easily transferred and left. They weren't recruited by Coach DeBoer and that staff, but they fell in love with those guys and developed a great relationship with them. They could tell Dejon Lee and Chuck McDonald, these aren't good coaches. These aren't good secondary coaches. Go somewhere else. But they sold the Alabama program, and that's all four of those guys are going to be doing that with Brandon Arrington over the course of these next several months. I think Alabama made a big move for him. That's going to be my prediction, Arrington to Bama.
We will allow it. We will allow it, and we like it. Joseph Hastings, get risky. Don't say Zion Gibson. Don't do it. Joe takes this stuff so serious. He's so worried about being wrong. Do not say Zion Gibson or Tank Jones.
Okay, I'm going to go with Trent Henderson out of Pensacola, Florida. Now, I got that offer from Alabama a couple weeks ago. And look, could you have lined up a better start for Alabama here? He gets the offer, schedules a visit to Alabama for Junior Day, gets visited by a trio of staff members in Freddie Roach, Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan at his school, goes to Alabama and immediately schedules an official visit for June 6th through the 8th and has plans to return in the spring. That's as good of a start as you can get. He immediately showed high interest. I'm interested to see how things play out with that official and the plan that Alabama sells to him in terms of how they utilize him. Still a little bit, unclear on his end, but he has an idea of what the staff wants from him, what they like from him, the feeling on campus. That was a very positive first step there, and Alabama's firmly in the mix early on in his recruitment. So yeah, that'd be my surprise. Yet nobody can hold me to a prediction.
Oh, you're held to it. I mean, there's a $500 fine for being wrong for you.
Hey, I took credit for Daniel Hill when I put in that RPM back in March of his junior year, and we heard the South Carolina smoke and all that. Stayed firm with that prediction. Now, if he wouldn't have gone to Alabama, then I don't know if I would have laid claim to it, but.
I hope not. See. I mean, you don't want to claim I'm going to go with Sincere Johnson. I don't know if I think it's a tough one, but I have a feeling that this is serious enough that I can bet on, Christian Robinson, who did a tremendous job. I think that Dawson Merritt ended up in Nebraska, but I think it was simply Alabama was a lot for him, honestly. It certainly wasn't anything Christian did. I know he's from Ohio. We went over that. I think you coming down with this serious. Some kids want to do something different. Andrew and I've covered kids our whole life where a Chad Jackson, he went to Florida, he was at Hoover, and he's literally told us, I just want to do something different. I mean, Najee Harris, there's kids that want to do something different. I think it'll be a tough battle, but I think he fits what Alabama's going to do. And you know something? And we talked about this, that everybody was freaking about it, some of the linebackers hitting the portal, right? Now you got 3 senior starters who are probably going to be gone. So they are battling redshirt freshmen or sophomores for playing time. And I think that's also going to factor and work in their favor. Andrew Bone, give us a final thought before we get out of here.
Well, it's been fun covering Alabama this last year.
You're not quitting. Stop. You're not quitting. Are you resigning?
Yes, this is it. I'm done. I cannot stand you guys.
We miss you. Oh.
I mean, you think back to this time last year. I mean, nothing has really slowed down until this point right now. I mean, we're in a dead period, but last year it was like, all right, we're in a dead period, but who are they actually recruiting? Who are they actually going to go after? You had no idea. I mean, we saw the guys that came in for Junior Day last year. Were they going to continue to recruit any of those guys? They did, but not all of them, and they continue to find new targets throughout the next few months. This year, we kind of know the guys that they're going after. There's going to be some new ones, but man, we're in a much better place. I think all of us are in a much better place knowing what's actually going on. So it'll be fun. Going to be a fun year to cover this 26th class with you guys.
We'll miss you, Joseph. You've been promoted. You'll be in the center next week. We don't know who's going to be over on the other side. Joseph, give us a final thought.
My final thought is going to be that Alabama staff, even though they didn't land the commitment yet, from this Junior Day here, everybody was expecting multiple RPMs and for 5 or 10 commitments on that Junior Day. Doesn't mean that progress isn't made. That doesn't mean that things haven't been, the foundation isn't laid for future commitments that we'll see. And I think with what the staff showed here on the Junior Day is that once again they can bring in guys. Present a family atmosphere for kids and their families, and just make it feel like a welcoming environment. That's the word that all the kids that we've spoken with so far have mentioned. Welcoming environment makes you feel at home. And those are some of the themes that we heard last year, and the staff is only continuing to build on it. And you have a lot of continuity there on the staff too, which is important. So yeah, I think even though we haven't seen a commitment yet, it was a very, very successful weekend for Alabama.
I think you make a good point about the staff. I mean, you get Ryan Grubb. I mean, there's no denying he was offensive coordinator that coached Michael Penix. So you got that. You still got Nick Sheridan on the staff, who's did a good job laying the groundwork, put the miles down with some 2027s. We saw him offer the younger Nussmeier, whose brother plays at LSU, and his dad, Doug Coach, was an offensive coordinator for Nick Saban. So we got that connection.
And he's the only quarterback in the 27.
They're not scattered. They're not buckshot with their offers. And you got Chuck Morrell, who seems pretty popular on the recruiting trail. I'll tell you one thing I like. I like that Kane Womack was able to focus on his defense, because there's a lot of young talent that can come in. They got a lot of linebackers. They got guys like Dijon Lee. They got a lot of guys that can play. He just got a month to really focus, get to know them, understand them, because you know how it is. You got to have that connection with them. In the meantime, Courtney Morgan's on the road, which is a no-brainer. You know what I mean? Somebody is coming off. Courtney, he knows how to spit it. He knows how to sing it. He knows how to talk to people. So I think it's a win-win. We can't get out of here without saying Roll Tide to you guys. We appreciate every one of y'all for joining the show. I mean, we're doing a live show now. It's risky. Some of us don't always remember wear a shirt in here, do they, Andrew? But thank you guys. Roll Tide. We'll see you on the round table. Join us on BamaOnLine. Talk all day. We talk all day sports. I mean, literally, we have covered we have had intense talks about the Luka trade. After this ends, we're going to explain who Luka is to Andrew. But we're happy to have you in Roll Tide. Andrew, get us out of here. Joseph, you get a final word.
Thank you guys for following. We'll see you on the BOL roundtable.
JoJo.
Thank you all for tuning in. For the comments, hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and Roll Tide.
See you on BamaOnLine. Thank you, guys and gals.